团结台湾同胞。
On today's World Insight with Tian Wei, breakthroughs in cross-strait relations, milestones over 40 years since the message of peaceful reunification to Taiwan compatriots. A tribute to China's elder scholars through the lens of a young photographer. Why are the pictures worth 1,000 words?
Draw their attention on all those masters.
And an unflinching look at China's millennials, the restless generation, and how they can change the country and the world with a young American author. Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live on CGTN. 40 years ago, on New Year's Day, 1979, China's top lawmaking body issued a letter to the people of Taiwan officially declaring the mainland's policy of peaceful reunification. 40 years later, China is commemorating that history-changing moment and mapping the future road for cross-strait relations. Take a look.
It's not just a policy address. President Xi Jinping's speech is filled with emotional appeals to the people of Taiwan.
台湾是中国一部分。
Nobody or no party can negate the natural attachment and national identity shared by people of the two sides, featuring our deep blood bonds and affinity to each other. Nobody or no party can stop the trend of the times that the Taiwan Strait situation will march towards peace and stability, and that a cross-strait relationship will move forward constructively. Nobody or no party can ever resist the historical trend of a country empowering itself, national rejuvenation, and reunification of the two sides of the Taiwan Strait.
National rejuvenation is a key term repeatedly invoked by President Xi ever since he came into office. But rejuvenation does not just mean revival on the mainland. Xi made it clear that this aim cannot be achieved without reunification with Taiwan.
For
the Chinese people who are striding towards the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, the Taiwan compatriots would not be absent. Compatriots on the mainland and Taiwan should join hands, realize the Chinese dream, and take responsibility together for national rejuvenation and share the glory of national rejuvenation. The Taiwan issue was caused by the weakness and chaos of the Chinese nation and will surely be resolved through national rejuvenation.
President Xi also sent a strong message to promoters of Taiwan independence.
Chinese people would not fight against each other. We are willing to make the greatest and most sincere efforts for the future of peaceful reunification, because achieving peaceful reunification is the most beneficial way for compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Strait and the whole Chinese nation. We will not promise to give up the use of force, and will reserve the right to use all necessary measures against the intervention of any outside forces and separatist activities by the very few Taiwan independent separatists, but absolutely not for our Taiwan compatriots.
President Xi reiterated the long-standing policy of one country, two systems as the solution to the issue, an idea first proposed by former leader Deng Xiaoping. The policy says that upon reunification, Taiwan's current social system can continue unchanged and even retain its military.
After peaceful reunification, Taiwan will forever be peaceful, and its people will live and work in peace and contentment. Having a strong motherland to rely on, the livelihood of our Taiwan compatriots will improve, and they will have more space for development. They will be more assertive and confident in the international community and feel safer and more dignified.
For more on cross-strait relations, we have in Taipei Zheng Youping, a professor from the Department of Public Administration and Policy at Taipei University. In our Beijing studio, Mr. Yang Xiyu, a senior research fellow from the China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. Happy New Year to both of you in Beijing and Taipei.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, sir. Let me start by asking you, Mr. Yang, in Beijing, is there any different this time, the speech given by Chinese President Xi Jinping regarding the cross-strait relations compared to the previous ones, both his and his predecessors?
Well, I think the latest speech, on one hand, insists on the long-time position of several generations of Chinese leadership, but on the other hand, offer a wider, more flexible room for exchanges across the strait, and meanwhile, more flexible room for the peaceful unification of our motherland.
Mr. Zheng, Professor, tell us more about what you feel after reading the speech.
After I read the speech, I'm deeply moved by President Xi's intention and his firmness. First of all, I have to say that we're all touched by his concern over the well-being of the Taiwanese compatriots here. And not only that, I think he's very firm in telling us that motherland is prepared to continue its pursuit of peaceful reunification between the two sides. Not only that, he also emphasized a very pragmatic approach toward this peaceful reunification. In other words, he's telling us that in the future, he envisions a common market across the Taiwan Strait for the Greater China Circle. And he would like to institutionalize the economic cooperation across the straits. Not only that, he also tells us that he's firmly against the Taiwan independence, the separatist movement, which makes all of us feel a lot more confident that Taiwan and mainland China will sooner or later be reunified. And it is only a matter of time before we see that.
Is it a smart thing to start from market unification in a way, Mr. Yang?
Well, I think market unification has been the major driving force in the long process of the peaceful unification across the strait. However, only by the market, only by economic power, we cannot achieve what we want. So mainly, we need to make more efforts on the other areas, especially the political consultation area, so that we can have more momentum and more powers towards our shared goal of the peaceful unification.
Since you mentioned political consultation, let me go back to some of the phrases that Chinese President Xi Jinping used in his speech. So-called in-depth democratic consultation. That's quite a phrase to be used. Mr. Zheng, from the mainland part, a lot of people give a lot of interpretations to this phrase. From your side, your interpretation of what exactly it meant and it could be meaning in a way to the Taiwan compatriots.
I think what we've read from his speech is that he is ready to start to initiate a democratic consultation across the straits, meaning that he would like to respect opinions and ideas from all sides of the political spectrum in Taiwan. In other words, he's not only ready to interact, to conduct dialogue with any political parties that accepts the 1992 consensus and the One China principle, but he's also willing to take into account, take into considerations from all sides, all the social forces in Taiwan. And I guess that is a very, very that's a very encouraging sign, because many people here in Taiwan are a bit concerned whether this kind of reunification talks or political consultation would only be initiated between KMT and CCP. And from what he said today, I guess it's very obvious that it's going to be a very open-minded approach to the dialogues between the two sides.
Professor Zheng, as you may notice, after Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech, the leaders now in Taiwan in Taiwan Island is quite nervous, coming out and talking about so-called the latest election result. That does not necessarily mean what she rather prefer not to mean. So you see quite a back and forth between the two sides, Professor Zheng, how do you read the common consensus that can be built for the next step? I mean, giving speech is one thing, but getting things done is another thing. And that's the way to get things done is totally a very different logic. So, Professor Zheng, about that part.
I would have to say that from the end result of the 91 local election a few weeks back, we can see that Taiwanese voters are very smart because they realize that by refusing to accept the 1992 consensus, Tsai Ing-wen administration and DPP have not been able to come up with any solid plans to improve Taiwanese well-being. In other words, without the mainland China market, without working with motherland, there is no way for Taiwan to build up another miracle, economic miracle. In other words, we are getting to see the mainstream public opinion in Taiwan gradually shifted toward greater acceptance of the 1992 consensus and the One China principle. The most recent opinion survey shows 61% of the Taiwanese residents are in support of the 1992 consensus. And also, we're looking at a very encouraging sign. The recent poll shows that 46% of college students, younger generations, Taiwanese, are willing to work, study, and even live in mainland China. And that goes to show that greater economic interdependence brings greater social integration and thereby bringing closer the two sides.
Certainly, the policies to encourage more interactions and exchanges across the Taiwan Straits and providing more opportunities for the young people in Taiwan really have been working very well across the Taiwan Strait and for the interest of both. Mr. Yang, though, let me ask you also about the all options remain on the table, which is also a phrase used in the speech. Of course, the Chinese President Xi Jinping said that is not targeting at the people in Taiwan, but rather the separatist, small separatist groups, and also about any foreign interference. So, Mr. Yang, what exactly, how do you interpret all options? If military options have been taken, I mean, that's a big if, that would mean certainly devastating consequences. Mr. Yang, how will the interests of the Taiwan people be protected if that were one of the options?
Well, firstly, if something happened, as you mentioned in the late part about the military option, that would be a disaster, not only for Taiwanese people, but also for the whole Chinese people. Just as we have said repeatedly for decades long, say, Chinese never fight against Chinese. However, all options on the table because there are some unexpected possible scenario. Number one, external interference for the unification process among Chinese people. And number two, a small group of Taiwanese really have been trying to separate Taiwan from the motherland. If either of the case happens, Beijing will have any other better choice to go to the military option so that China can remain in the unification type.
Okay.
So in other words, without the military option, we cannot exclude the possibility or probability of the separation of China.
Professor Zheng, there are two things that we need to mention here just for the context of this specific phrase. One is that you see, if you look at the recent trend of China-U.S. relations, things are not necessarily going to a better direction, but rather causing concern. And the Taiwan issue has been one issue of, shall we say, hot debated areas between the two countries from the very beginning of the start of the relationship 40 years ago. The second thing is the DPP, of course, has been quite surprised, quote unquote, by, as they said, by the latest local election result, and with possible foreign interference, the DPP could take a road of no return. That is also a big concern for many. So, given the context, how do you understand the all options, and how shall we avoid, shall we say, the most devastating option?
I would have to say that the United States is very smart in playing the Taiwan card in terms of, or in trying to contain or to obstruct China's rise to a superpower position. Now, obviously, the United States has assigned China the role of a strategic rival. But then, at the same time, we're looking at Donald Trump and his administration trying to work closely with mainland China. In other words, they realize that without China, the United States will not be able to stand alone in the international arena. It needs China's help in managing this complex international political economic system. But at the same time, using Taiwan as a card, as a pawn in the game, is something I think the American government has been doing in the past few years. But here, we know that there is a line in the sand, very clearly marked, the red line that will not be passed. So United States administration has always been very keen to emphasize that one China policy and the free joint communiques are their basis for dealing with mainland China and Taiwan. But unfortunately, in Taiwan, DPP's head, Tsai Ing-wen, thinks otherwise. She thinks that by using the American card, that she'll be able to tear apart the relationship between mainland China and Taiwan. And by doing so, she's trying to create a political opportunity for herself. That's why we are very worried. After losing the local election, Tsai Ing-wen might resort to even more radical approaches in dealing with the cross-Strait issues in 2019, because by radicalizing their positions, by infuriating mainland China, she thinks in her mind that she might be able to gather stronger support from the pro-independence people here in Taiwan. We have to say that she's making a very serious mistake here, because she misjudged Taiwanese people's wisdom. I think most Taiwanese residents today have come to realize that DPP and Tsai Ing-wen are only playing a game that is too dangerous for Taiwan to play.
Mr. Yang, I mean, you are someone that can really speak on this matter. You were working in Washington in the Chinese embassy, dealing with issues related to Taiwan as well at that time. And also, you know that in the year of the Bush administration, Bush Junior, of course, it was during that time that President Bush was talking about the U.S. is against independence of Taiwan. That, of course, has been warmly received from China's mainland. Mr. Yang, if you see the ups and downs of U.S.-China relations and the Taiwan card that various administrations have played over the decades, what do you make of the latest round?
Well, I think during the past 4 decades, U.S. government's policy towards Taiwan, I would say, is mainly stable, but with some fluctuation by playing cards, as you mentioned. But every time they play card, it's always at the crisis or bad shape of the bilateral relation between Beijing and Washington. And in recent period, under the Trump administration, the situation has some different factors. The most important factor is the national power between China and the U.S. is narrowed down, and the U.S. has Trump administration has regarded China as a main strategic rivalry. So with the new background, neither of the Democratic and Republican previous presidents faced. With the new background, I think the Washington administration is playing hard more strategically than before. So I'm really worried about the current trends, especially the interactions between Washington and Taipei under the new background.
Professor Zheng and Mr. Yang, we are coming to the last 2 minutes of the show, but thinking about that, the year 2019 is going to be quite a year. Some already predicted that you're going to see the latest trend of China-U.S. relations. You're going to see all factors try to move the things to their advantage, and you will see a lot of turbulence as a result of that. Professor Zheng, from your perspective, how do you see the Taiwan issue in the new year? What should be prepared in order to smoothly get through the year? Professor Zheng, and then later to Mr. Yang, briefly from both of you.
This may be a year of turbulence. Tsai Ing-wen obviously will play even more radical approaches, trying to gather support from among her camp, the pro-independence camp. Meanwhile, we're going to see 15 cities and counties, magistrates and mayors from the KMT camp looking to increase city-to-city exchanges across the straits. That might be a positive sign for all of us, because by promoting more and more city-to-city exchanges, we're going to lay the foundation for a peaceful coexistence between the two sides.
And the last words also coming from Mr. Yang, please.
This year, China-U.S. relation will be able to enjoy more stable shape of the bilateral relation than last year. But a strategic variable is Taiwan, as Professor Zheng mentioned. If China play radical policies by making use of U.S. card, then the U.S.-China relation, meanwhile, the cross-Strait relation will go through turbulences.
Yang Xiyu, Zheng Youpeng, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us for the year 2019. Happy New Year to both of you. Thank you so much.